Have you ever had someone vanish from your life? No warning, no goodbye, no closure. One day they were there, and the next, gone, like a ghost fading into silence. It leaves a hole, doesn't it? But behind that silence, there's a storm most people never see. Today, we're going deep into the psychology of people who disappear without saying goodbye. Sometimes, walking away without words isn't about weakness, it's about survival. When someone disappears without saying goodbye, it often stems from deep emotional exhaustion, a kind of fatigue that doesn't show on the outside but burns silently within. It's the kind of tired that comes not from lack of sleep, but from carrying unspoken pain for far too long. These people have reached a place where explanations no longer make sense, where every conversation feels like another battle they can't win. So, instead of explaining, defending, or justifying, they choose silence. Not because they don't care, but because they've given all they could. And words have lost their meaning. When the mind is overwhelmed, the heart seeks peace. People who vanish often do so because they've been living in emotional noise for too long. Maybe they've been trying to please everyone, to fix relationships, to keep harmony alive even when it was slowly destroying them. Every argument, every misunderstanding, every broken promise chips away at their emotional strength until one day they simply can't anymore. There's no dramatic goodbye, no confrontation, just a quiet disappearance. It's not the act of someone who wants to hurt others, but of someone who's been hurt so much they can no longer stay in the fight. For many, silence becomes the only safe space left. Words can be twisted, intentions can be questioned, emotions can be dismissed, but silence is untouchable. In their quiet exit, they find power again. It's a way to reclaim control over their life, to take a stand for their mental health without needing validation or permission. They're not running away. They're retreating to protect what little strength remains. In the world's eyes, they may look like quitters, but in truth, they are survivors who have reached their emotional limit. When people disappear, it's often because they've spent too much time trying to explain their feelings to those who never really listened. It's draining to open your heart repeatedly only to be met with indifference or judgment. After a while, they stop talking, not because they don't have anything to say, but because they've realized no one is truly hearing them. Disappearing becomes a form of self-respect, a way to preserve what's left of their inner peace. The silence that follows isn't emptiness, it's healing in motion. It's the space where they can breathe again, where they can finally hear their own thoughts without being drowned out by others. There's also a psychological shift that happens before someone decides to disappear. The brain moves from connection to protection mode. The desire to explain fades, replaced by the instinct to escape harm. They stop seeing leaving as betrayal and start seeing it as self-defense. In that moment, silence becomes their armor. It shields them from further disappointment, from being misunderstood, from the pain of trying to fix what's already broken. And while others might view their disappearance as cold or heartless, for the one leaving, it feels like the only path to survival. But here's the truth most people miss. Those who disappear often feel tremendous guilt. They don't vanish without feeling. They think about the people they've left behind, the unfinished words, the unanswered messages. But they also know that staying would mean losing themselves completely. And when a person reaches that point, goodbye becomes too small of a word. They don't leave to hurt, they leave to heal. It's not an escape from others, it's a return to their own sanity. So when someone walks away without a word, remember this. They may not be running from you, but running back to themselves. Their silence speaks volumes. It says, I've fought enough battles. I've tried enough times. Now, it's time to protect my peace. And in that quiet decision, there lies one of the most powerful acts of courage a human being can take, the choice to stop explaining their pain and start healing from it. They disappear because confrontation feels like drowning. For some people, emotional conflict is not just uncomfortable, it's suffocating. The moment voices rise or energy shifts into tension, their heart rate climbs, their chest tightens, and a deep instinct tells them to escape. It's not about avoiding responsibility, it's about protecting their mental state from spiraling into chaos. These individuals may have grown up in environments where every disagreement turned into a war, where love felt conditional and calm moments were rare. So as adults, even the smallest confrontation can awaken buried memories of helplessness. Leaving silently becomes their way of regaining control in a situation that feels emotionally dangerous. They're not afraid of people. They're afraid of the emotional weight that comes with trying to explain what they feel. In their mind, confrontation doesn't solve problems, it deepens wounds. When they sense a situation escalating, their survival instinct activates, telling them to get out before the storm hits. To outsiders, it looks like avoidance or coldness, but for them it's self-preservation. Their nervous system interprets intense emotion as a threat, and their reaction, to flee instead of fight, is a deeply human response. It's the same psychology behind why some people shut down during stress instead of reacting. Their silence is not a refusal to engage. It's a desperate attempt to stay calm when the world feels unsafe. When trust has been broken enough times, the emotional cost of confrontation feels too high. They've had moments before where they tried to express their pain and were met with ridicule, blame, or indifference. That memory doesn't fade easily. It stays in the body, shaping how they respond to every future conflict. So, when faced with another painful situation, their heart whispers, "Don't explain again." It won't change anything. That's why they choose to disappear, to protect themselves from reliving the disappointment of being unheard once more. It's important to understand that disappearing isn't always about rejection. It's about boundaries. People who vanish like this often have reached a point where their emotional energy is completely drained. They've given chance after chance, tried to fix what was broken, and finally realized that not every relationship can be healed through conversation. In their world, silence is the cleanest break. Talking feels messy, painful, and endless. They'd rather leave quietly than drag out the hurt. And though it may seem cold to those left behind, it's often the kindest thing they can do for both sides. Because forcing words when the heart is already broken only deepens the wound. This pattern also reflects something deeper, the need for inner peace. These people value emotional stability above all else. They've seen what chaos does to the soul, and they refuse to live in that space again. They don't want another argument, another misunderstanding, another "let's talk" that leads nowhere. They crave silence not because they're indifferent, but because they're exhausted. They know that sometimes peace doesn't come from fixing what broke, it comes from stepping away from it entirely. And while to others it may seem like running away, it's actually the opposite. It's a brave decision to end cycles that no longer serve them. Walking away without confrontation takes immense strength. It means choosing peace over proving a point. It means understanding that not every story deserves an ending filled with words. Some endings are meant to be silent, honest, and freeing. So when they disappear, it's not out of cruelty, it's an act of quiet courage. They choose to protect their heart rather than keep fighting a losing battle. They know that not every closure is verbal, not every goodbye is spoken. Some goodbyes happen within the soul, a silent release, a deep breath, and a decision to never return to what once drowned them. In that silence, they're not escaping life, they're saving it. There are people who vanish because they spent years trying to fix others while neglecting themselves. These are the givers, the healers, the ones who always show up no matter how tired they are. They're the ones who answer every late-night call, who stay through someone else's chaos, who love deeply, even when it hurts. They keep trying to hold everyone together, thinking love means sacrificing themselves. But slowly, their energy fades. They give and give until there's nothing left to give, and then, one day, something inside them breaks quietly. There's no warning, no announcement, they just disappear. not to hurt anyone, but because their soul finally whispers, it's time to rest. You see, when someone spends too long being the strong one, they start to forget what peace feels like. They take on everyone's pain, everyone's burdens, until they lose touch with their own needs. Every time they put someone else first, they drift further away from themselves. And after years of this invisible labor, of being the emotional foundation for others, they suddenly realize they're standing in the ruins of their own well-being. That's the moment they decide to walk away, not because they stopped caring, but because they can't keep drowning while trying to save everyone else. Psychologically, this behavior stems from what's called compassion fatigue or emotional burnout. It happens when someone's empathy is stretched too thin for too long. Their brain and heart become overwhelmed from constantly managing the emotions of others. When this exhaustion reaches its peak, their system shuts down. They can't communicate, can't explain, can't justify. They just vanish. Their silence isn't coldness, it's the body and mind forcing a reset. It's their subconscious saying, "You've done enough. Now, save yourself." It's also common for these people to feel invisible even while giving everything. They might pour love and energy into relationships where their efforts go unnoticed or unappreciated. And the moment they realize their kindness is being taken for granted, something inside them changes. They no longer have the strength to explain their worth. So, instead of arguing for respect, they reclaim it in silence. Leaving becomes the ultimate act of self-love, a quiet declaration that they will no longer be the caretaker for everyone else's chaos. This decision doesn't come easily. They wrestle with guilt, wondering if disappearing makes them selfish or cruel. But deep down, they know they've already sacrificed too much. They understand that constantly fixing others has kept them from fixing themselves. They see that being the emotional savior has cost them their peace, their energy, and sometimes even their identity. So they walk away, not with anger, but with acceptance. It's a realization that love shouldn't always mean losing yourself in the process. And as they disappear, something remarkable happens. They begin to heal. In the quiet, they rediscover who they are without the noise of other people's problems. They start to feel again, breathe again, live again. Their solitude becomes sacred, a space where they can finally hear their own heartbeat instead of everyone else's cries. For the first time in a long time, they begin to choose themselves. So, when someone who is always there suddenly disappears, know this: it's not betrayal, it's rebirth. They didn't stop caring, they just finally cared enough about themselves to stop breaking for others. Their silence is not the sound of abandonment, it's the sound of recovery. It's a soft, powerful reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to stop pouring into others and start pouring back into yourself. Because even the strongest hearts need to rest, and even the kindest souls need to be saved from the weight of carrying everyone else. Sometimes, disappearing is how they protect what's left of their spirit. When life becomes too heavy, when people stop listening, and when every conversation feels like walking through fire, leaving silently becomes the only escape. These people don't vanish because they're weak. They vanish because they've been strong for too long. They've endured countless moments of disrespect, disappointment, and emotional chaos, all while pretending everything was fine. But inside they were breaking piece by piece. And when that final piece falls, the only thing left to do is to protect what little piece remains. That's when they disappear, not out of spite, but out of self-defense. You can only absorb so much pain before your soul starts to shut down. These individuals have likely been through cycles of betrayal and misunderstanding so often that their nervous system becomes hypersensitive to conflict. Every harsh word feels like a wound, every argument feels like an earthquake. So when they choose silence, it's not because they don't care. It's because they've had enough of bleeding emotionally. They no longer want to fight battles that only leave them more scarred. Walking away is how they finally say, "I choose me." It's how they draw an invisible line between what hurts them and what heals them. In psychological terms, this is a powerful act of boundary setting. When someone has been repeatedly drained by toxic relationships or environments, their subconscious mind begins to associate those spaces with danger. Disappearing becomes a survival instinct, a way of removing themselves from anything that threatens their mental or emotional stability. To outsiders, it might look abrupt or confusing, but to the one leaving, it's crystal clear. They know staying means losing themselves entirely. So they step away quietly, before they reach the point of no return. And here's what makes their silence even more profound. It's not born from hatred, but from clarity. They've realized that not everyone deserves access to them. They've learned that peace is more valuable than being understood, and solitude is far more healing than staying where their worth is questioned. Their disappearance isn't running away, it's rising above. It's their way of reclaiming their space, their dignity, and their sanity. They understand now that no explanation will ever make people see the pain they endured, so they stop explaining altogether. Their silence becomes their shield. When someone reaches this point, it's because they've already tried every other way. They've talked, reasoned, cried, compromised, and still nothing changed. They've watched their efforts go unnoticed, their feelings dismissed, and their love taken for granted. So eventually they stop trying to be understood by those who refuse to listen. They stop chasing closure, stop seeking apologies, and stop hoping for change. They realize that sometimes peace doesn't come from fixing what's broken. It comes from walking away from it. That's when their disappearance becomes an act of liberation, not escape. The truth is, protecting your spirit requires immense courage. It means walking away from what's familiar, even when it hurts. It means accepting that not everyone will understand your silence, and being okay with that. The people who disappear like this often find themselves judged by those they left behind. They're called heartless, cold, or selfish. But deep down, they know they had no choice. They've spent years putting others first, tolerating pain in the name of love, and sacrificing their peace for the sake of loyalty. Now, their disappearance is the only way to break free from that cycle. And though their silence may look like an ending, it's actually the beginning of something powerful. In solitude, they rediscover their strength. They reconnect with who they are beneath the noise. They realize that peace isn't found in others, it's built within. Protecting your spirit doesn't mean avoiding life, it means choosing life. It means choosing stillness over chaos, healing over history, and self-respect over suffering. So when they walk away without a word, they're not disappearing, they're finally coming home to themselves. For others, silence is the only truth left. There comes a point in a person's life when words lose their power, when every attempt to explain, defend, or justify feels meaningless. These are the people who've been misunderstood so many times that they no longer have the energy to make others see their side. They've realized that not everyone is ready to understand their pain, and not everyone is willing to listen with empathy. So they stop speaking. Their silence becomes their final language, their last form of honesty. Because sometimes silence tells the truth more clearly than words ever could. They've been through enough situations where speaking up only led to arguments or judgment. Every time they tried to express their heart, they were met with disbelief or dismissal. Eventually, the mind learns, why talk when no one's truly listening? Why explain your heart to someone who only hears what they want to hear? So, they fall quiet, and in that quiet, they find a strange sense of strength. Their silence becomes a filter, protecting them from those who don't deserve access to their emotions. It's not about pride, it's about peace. They've learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. This silence also represents something deeper, emotional maturity. It takes great strength to choose calm over chaos, stillness over reaction. People who disappear into silence aren't running, they're elevating. They understand that not every battle deserves a response, Not every betrayal deserves closure, and not every goodbye needs words. Silence becomes their armor, their boundary, their shield. It's how they reclaim control over their emotions. When they stop explaining themselves, they're not giving up. They're rising above the need to be understood by those who never try to understand them in the first place. There's also a psychological shift that happens here. When someone's been through repeated emotional pain, their brain starts craving safety over connection. They realize that talking about pain often reopens wounds instead of healing them. So they begin to protect their energy with silence. It's not avoidance, it's wisdom. They've learned the hard way that peace doesn't come from being right or being heard. It comes from being free. And freedom begins the moment they stop handing out explanations to people who never valued them. This kind of silence can be powerful, but it can also be lonely. People who choose it often feel invisible at first. They may look calm on the outside, but inside they're rebuilding piece by piece. Yet, through that stillness, they begin to find themselves again. They start to realize that their worth was never dependent on anyone's understanding. Their silence becomes sacred. It's the sound of their healing, the rhythm of their recovery. Every quiet moment becomes a step toward inner strength, toward emotional clarity, toward freedom. And it's in that quiet that they rediscover truth, not the kind found in arguments or explanations, but the kind that lives deep inside the soul. They begin to see who truly values them. They learn that those who care will notice their absence, and those who don't were never really there. Silence reveals what noise used to hide. It separates the genuine from the fake, the loyal from the temporary. And in that awareness, they find peace. So when someone goes quiet, don't mistake it for weakness. Silence is not emptiness, it's evolution. It's the sound of someone finally realizing they owe no one their pain, no one their defense, no one their words. They've outgrown the need to explain themselves to those who never tried to understand. Their silence is strength, it's clarity, it's freedom. It's the moment they stop fighting for validation and start living for truth. Because sometimes the most powerful voice a person can have is the one that chooses not to speak at all. And finally, those who disappear often come back stronger. Their silence is not a permanent retreat, it's a period of transformation. When someone vanishes without a word, they're stepping away from the noise of the world to rebuild what was broken inside them. They're not gone forever, they're simply becoming someone new. Life has tested them, drained them, and left them empty, but solitude becomes their sanctuary, the place where they gather their strength again. When they walk away, they don't do it to disappear forever, they do it to return as the best version of themselves, calmer, wiser, and unshakable. In those quiet moments away from everyone, something remarkable happens. They begin to see things clearly. The patterns, the mistakes, the people who drain their energy. Distance reveals truth. Without the constant noise of others, they finally hear their own voice. And in that voice, they find power again. They realize they don't need anyone's validation, that they are whole even in solitude. The time alone that once felt painful slowly turns into power. Their isolation becomes their teacher, showing them that peace is built, not given. Psychologically, solitude allows the mind to reset. It gives space for reflection, for understanding, and for emotional repair. When people disappear, they often spend that time confronting the very emotions they once ran from. They face the fears, the heartbreaks, the disappointments, and through that process, they transform pain into wisdom. They learn that healing isn't found in noise or in endless explanations, it's found in stillness. They stop seeking closure from others and start creating it within themselves. Every moment alone becomes a step closer to freedom from the past. As they rebuild, something changes in how they view relationships and life. They no longer chase people who take them for granted. They stop trying to fix what doesn't want to be fixed. They learn to say no without guilt, to set boundaries without apology. Their silence teaches them that they can't control how others treat them, but they can control how long they allow it. They stop waiting for external peace and start creating it internally. When they finally return, they carry a new kind of strength, a quiet confidence that doesn't need to prove anything. And when they reappear, you'll notice it. Their energy is different, calm, focused, untouchable. They don't react the way they used to. They've learned that not every action deserves a reaction. Not every comment deserves attention, and not every person deserves access to their world. Their comeback is not loud or dramatic. It's silent, steady, and powerful. Because they no longer need to announce their growth, it speaks for itself. Their peace, their stillness, their glow, it all says, "I made it out stronger." But perhaps the most profound thing about their return is the understanding they gain. They forgive, not because others deserve it, but because they deserve freedom from anger. They move differently, love differently, think differently. They stop living to be understood and start living to understand themselves. The version of them that returns after disappearing is no longer controlled by fear, validation, or pain. They are guided by purpose, clarity, and strength. So if someone you knew once disappeared and came back changed, understand this: they didn't come back to be who they were before. They came back to start anew. Their silence wasn't a retreat, it was a rebirth. And if you're someone who's disappeared before, know that you're not broken. You were rebuilding. You were gathering your strength in the dark so you could rise in the light again. Sometimes walking away is how we learn to walk forward. Sometimes disappearing is how we find ourselves. Because every soul that disappears in silence has the potential to return with unshakable peace and a strength the world cannot break.